This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you from the Brooklyn bunker once again. It's chilly in the bunker today. I should have prepared a cup of tea or something to keep my hands warm. I did not take that step. So I'm just going to be very alert throughout the proceedings. And if I disappear for a minute, it's just because I went to get a sweater.
It's cold down there because you got ghosts down there. I'm still mad at you for not telling me about that.
That was one of the great moments in podcast history where JK learned on air that the Brooklyn bunker at one point in its past life was a funeral home, and probably the area where he sleeps on his periodic visits to Brooklyn. That's probably where the magic happened. But anyway, I'm not ready for you yet. It's show 383, November 9th, 2018 edition. The voice you just heard, that's my co-pilot on this program. He's been here of these 383 shows. I don't know how many you've been here for, at least 250. We'll look that up at some point. He is the people's champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
Hold on one second. Hold on. 250. It might not be 251. We have to have a conversation, production meeting. And hold on. The basement used to be a funeral home.
You knew this. This was the whole thing about the ghosts and the whole bit. We talked about this. You blocked it out.
I am sleeping on the red couch forever, if ever again. I'm not going down there anymore.
There's plenty of good Airbnbs in the neighborhood if you want to be a cool cat and stay out in Brooklyn, or you can be like the rest of the visitors and just go stay in Manhattan. There's even like a Best Western now on Union. That might be about your speed.
Well, I tell you what's not my speed is a haunted basement where people were embalmed.
There's more stories, but I'll save them. Maybe if we next time we do a Halloween show. The problem is the Halloween show is always the Breeders' Cup, so we never get to do silliness. This is a good time of year for silliness. Maybe the next time we do a Friday the 13th edition of the show, we can get in a little more of the history of this fine building. But we had a priest, a rabbi, an imam. They all came by. They blessed the place. Everything's good to go, man. Don't worry about it. If there's any ghosts left, they're happy. Is that good enough for you?
I'm not really sure yet.
Plenty of time to figure this all out. Today, what we're going to be figuring out is more thoughts from the Breeders' Cup. We rocketed through all of the races on the Tuesday show. If you haven't heard that, go back and listen. This is going to be a little different. If you're coming here today looking for information about this weekend's races, I have some bad news. I haven't had the chance to look yet. JK has been running around. I don't think you've had the chance to look yet. Perhaps if you're feeling generous, I know you've got some more travel coming up this weekend. Maybe on one of your flights, you could open up your Twitter at UT Big Hair for some specific questions about races this weekend. Where will you, which races do you project to look at?
Most of my focus is going to be at Del Mar. I'm going to head out and play in the Del Mar contest tomorrow. So most of my focus will be there. I'll take a look at all the big ones, Naira and Churchill and whatever. But most of my focus is going to be on Del Mar. I think a lot of people have a little bit of a Breeders' Cup hangover, but I'm gonna fuel up the jet and head on out.
I like it. And you know what? This contest, that could play as an advantage to you. We talk a lot about how in live bankroll contests, there's a lot of people playing who are happy to lay up or finish at the top, but not necessarily be aggressive enough to go for the win. Now you're going to take a Del Mar contest the week after the Breeders' Cup. You've got to figure your chances as an aggressive player to get a big win in a live bank event go up in here. Is that part of what's factoring into your decision to play, or do you just miss San Diego?
Well, I think Chris Barr does a great job with his contest. We've talked about it before. I believe they call it the Seabiscuit Room, but it's not the Seabiscuit. It's really close. But the room up there is one of the best views that you can get from a racetrack, let alone where they'll put you for a contest. So that's always fun to get out there. I like to support the contests that do it right. It's a big money, live money situation, so those are always attractive as well. And I have a little sneaky goal to try to get a high placing on the tour. And without, and I haven't played online yet, so I still have some more scores to gain, and obviously playing in this contest at Del Mar this weekend is a good way to try to get some extra points.
Let's talk about this. You obviously have won the tour in the past. You're drawing dead, I'm afraid, on that honor, at least for this season. But is this to get into the contest within a contest at the NHC? Is that the goal?
Well, I'd like to get in the top 40, of course. If you aren't familiar, the top 40 in the tour compete in their own little contest for like 20 or 25,000. Whoever's the best of those 40, whoever finishes the highest of those 40 gets the 20 or 20,000, so, or 20 or 25,000. So I'd like to try to do that. But then also in a roundabout weird way, it's still possible to make it into the top 20 where there's actually prize money involved. The only commitment I've made to myself is that I'm not going to chase it online. I love our friends at the NTRA, and I love what they do with that contest, but those online games don't fit my my financial personality, I guess might be the best way to go about it.
Your financial personality. I like it.
That was nice, wasn't it?
It was you could if this whole punditry thing doesn't work out, there's a future for you in politics. I think what you're getting at is ratios of prizes to winners and things of that nature. You'd rather pay more and have a better chance to win, especially when it comes to betting actual money, than play online in a low ratio event. Is that safe to say that that's sort of the crux, as well as maybe the financial terms of what you're referring to?
Absolutely, and it doesn't fit my handicapping personality as well. I mean, I take a lot of jabs about being a chalk player, true or false, whatever you want to say it is. If it happens to be true, 1 in 65 ratios are not my friend as a chalk player.
You've done very well in those events. When you've done well in the past with mythical contests, is that because you're adjusting your style, or are you just stringing together a lot of winners? Or just a quick reflection on that before we move forward here.
I just think it's the days where it's hard for me to find a 10, 12. 10 and 12 is not that hard. It's hard for me to find 15 to 25 to 1 shots. When I find those horses, though, I also find the 2 to 1s and 3 to 1s that I think help make the difference. So the days I've done well, that's how it happens, where a lot of guys are looking for those 15 and 20 to 1 shots, and when they come, they don't find anything else. I find those other little pieces of crumbs to elevate me above them. But a lot of days there's a couple of 15 to 1 shots, and I'm not gonna do well on days like that.
People are going to be curious of our thoughts about the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge plays being published. Fascinating reading. I've gotten in some very interesting Twitter conversations about that. We're going to put a pin in that. I think we're going to come back on Tuesday and maybe even do a whole show about the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. So we're not going to talk about that today. Unless you have something quick here.
Yeah, just funny enough, I didn't tell you this happened, but yesterday I was I tweeted a response to someone saying something. I think you were involved in the thread. Tony was involved in the thread. I was about to tweet this response. I typed it all out and my phone died. And I said that was the intervention trying to keep me from saying something stupid on Twitter that was going to upset friends. So I took it as a sign that I'll just save it for Tuesday.
Let's save it for Tuesday. I think that's a good idea. Also, lots of Twitter chatter about that Horse of the Year question. I'm very happy with how I've framed my argument and the idea that reasonable people, including you and me, can disagree when it comes to that thought. We're going to save that one too, just because I think we should give it some time. to see how we feel. And that's a conversation that's just going to become so much more relevant around the actual vote, which doesn't happen I think that vote happens right at the end of the year, if I remember right. So that's another thing we won't be talking about on today's show. You were curiously silent about it. If you have a quick thought.
Did you see someone tweeted one of Dwayne Lucas's quotes? Did you see that?
I did not. Do tell.
Well, it'll be a talking point for next week or later whenever we talk about it. It was, I'm paraphrasing, you shouldn't have to explain a horse of the year or a horse of the year's accomplishments to a person walking down the street.
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
Like, Justify won the Triple Crown. That's pretty darn easy for a layman to understand. Accelerate Success might be a little bit more challenging.
I don't know. You win the championship race and 4 of the grade 1. Anyway, we're not talking about this now. Let's go to Breeders' Cup Friday, and let's start off at the beginning with the Juvenile Turf Sprint. What I want to do basically going through these races is highlight different areas that we didn't have an opportunity to get into necessarily the first time around, and identify horses who we're interested in going forward, rides we really liked, rides we maybe didn't love, that type of thing. I think if we just run through the races, that might keep this stuff in our head more than asking general questions. Are you good with that? Are you good with that format?
Absolutely.
And starting there, I think it's a super obvious one with Soldier's Call. Now, I'm still not 100% convinced that the rail, I know they rode like they thought the rail was bad. There were some horses that ran okay on it, especially on Friday. I'm going to withhold judgment before I'm betting large sums of money, betting back horses who spent time on the rail. However, when it comes to Soldier's Call, who you can add in breaking slow more than 2 lengths and making a visually impressive move also on the rail, this is a horse who I'm just not going to hold this trip against him even one tiny bit. Now, he's not going to come back and race here anytime soon. And when he races over there, I don't see them holding this race against him. So I'm not saying it's some brilliant bet back or anything, but it's just a horse I wanted to highlight that I'm super duper interested in moving forward, who I didn't think lost a thing in the Juvenile Turf Sprint. Did you have any other thoughts on this race, JK, looking at it again?
Well, this is not me. I want you just along the way, please let me know which one of the horses you felt like was just when we're having these conversations that ran well on the rail. I'm trying to think in my brain. I can't think of it. It's not a challenging question. It's just point them out when you come to. I
think I got a couple we can, well, I mean, we'll get to it in the Juvenile Turf where Line of Duty and Uncle Benny, I thought, spent time on the rail. I mean but we'll get there when we get there.
I thought Chelsea Cloisters ran really well in here, and my eyes were obviously hooked because, used at 24-1 in various situations. So I think the thing that really jumped out to me about this race was, I think a theme that will carry throughout carried throughout the summer, will carry throughout the years, is how poorly, for his standards, Todd Pletcher's 2-year-olds have run this year. And surprisingly so, it seems that those races all go wrong at the gate. And I thought that it was really interesting to see Bulletin just he was 3 clear, in the first 4 jumps. I mean, it's like he rocketed away from there. In a trip note, I think you would put beat the gate. I mean, I thought he was super fast in there. So I thought he ran really well. And I'm interested to see some of these horses stretch out. I mean, obviously some of the good ones that ran well, so perfect, and Queen of Bermuda and Soldier's Call, some of them might not stretch out. However, I'll be in, and when they do, they'll stretch out somewhere else. I'm still interested to see that happen. And just keep in mind, a lot of these horses aren't going to didn't like the yielding ground, whether they're on the inside or the outside.
That's a great point too.
Shang is a horse that I kind of wish would have run, because for a lot of reasons. One, I would have loved to bet against because of the info we had that they didn't like the soft turf. I say that for a handicapper's perspective, not for the horse. I mean, obviously I don't want to put the horse in a situation that he's not happy about. I commend them for taking care of him, but I think he would be a fun opportunity to bet back off of a poor performance. So These races are tricky because some of these horses are going to try to stretch. I mean, I would imagine Bulletin will eventually try to stretch.
It'll be something to keep an eye on. Obviously, they had the opportunity to go longer, but especially with a horse like Bullet in limited form, the sprint made more sense. We'll have to see.
I was talking to Jake. I'm pretty sure, I don't have it in front of me. We were hanging out the other day. I think they paid a pretty good amount of money for Bulletin. He's a city zip, which isn't, that's not the type of horse that WinStar buys, with a lot of sprint pedigree. So there must be something, I would assume, this is all assumptions. We can maybe ask Sean Tugel, but there must be something about the horse physically that made them think that there was an opportunity to stretch, or maybe they were just looking for a sprinter. It's just kind of outside of what they normally do.
That's an interesting point, and it's something that we should ask Tugel about, and we're probably overdue to bother him. Let's talk about the juvenile filly turf. Obviously, newspaper of record we spent plenty of time on last time. One horse I think could go on the bet back list, especially for those who are convinced the inside was bad on Friday, and just in general going forward has kind of an interesting look, was bet pretty hard into the teeth of newspaper of record, as you had predicted, JK. That's Concrete Rose, maybe one to keep an eye on in there. Again, not ready to bet back powerfully until we get a little bit more information. But she's one I'm going to keep on the radar. Did you have any other thoughts coming out of that race other than how awesome newspaper of record was?
I thought she was remarkable. Yeah, Concrete Rose she was really the only one that made a visual move for someone who had $15,000 on the line that made me go, oh.
I can't believe you even did that, is the fact that your bet was a high canter at the time.
Exactly. But she made a run, and she was one of the fillies that I had feared. Obviously, and she would have been, if she would have won, I wouldn't have been totally destroyed because, friendly with the owner, Bo, and I would have been very happy for him. But Stellar Agent spent a little bit of time down there. But when you see a horse who's 71-1 who runs third in a grade 1 on the biggest stage, you're probably not going to get the value you need on her moving forward. So I think that she could be a little bit of a sucker play if you fell into her. And then Just Wonderful, if you're a guy that gets up early on a Saturday and wants to get involved in European racing, I think she'll probably improve, but she'll always be bet as well, being from the Aidan O'Brien yard.
And being the current Guinea's favorite as well, I believe. There was some trouble there for Just Wonderful, though. That the typical bad Euro break, right? Put her in a bad spot, and she actually did do some running in there.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's a little bit of a cheat if you aren't doing the video work that I recommend you do. If you look at it, if you feel like maybe a rail was dead or a blah 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 blah, you can sometimes just see words that give you enough of a clue. And for her, it said save ground. So you got to think that she was, at some point, she was down inside. She tipped out 6 wide upper stretch, but right when she was making her run, or when the real running began, she was saving ground, quote unquote, which would indicate that she was down inside.
Jaywalk made a mockery of the juvenile fillies. Did you have any bet backs in here? And if you do not have a specific answer for that, I'll just ask you about Bellafina and what you do with her going forward.
Well, I have a lot of things here. You had kind of given me some ideas of what we were going to talk about today: best rides, worst rides, bet backs, things like that. I think this probably goes in the category as one of my best rides. I think that one of the best rides I thought was Joel. I thought he was brilliant on the horse. He did that thing that I love to see, our buddy Kent DeSormo do from time to time, which is just very patient, not very aggressive with the stick, and just was throwing crosses at her at the top of the lane, and she just exploded. I thought the ride on Jaywalk was impressive. She's not going to be a price, but she's going to be a single when she runs back for me. I think she's very, very impressive. She's a small little thing and looks like she's got some room to grow. I thought Vibrance ran well, considering at 35-1. I think that she's definitely one that could grow up into being a really good horse. And I think probably I could get interested in Sipican Harbor and or Serengeti Empress cutting back. I think those are the types of fillies that maybe the 2 turns. I know Serengeti Empress gave us the impression that she was going to be some type of freak, winning by 19 going 2 turns, but she might be a little bit better cutting back. And Bellafina's one that I always questioned, and I think that she'll always kind of be bet a little bit, and I think I'll probably always try to find a way to beat her. I'm just not overly impressed with her, and I kind of fell for the trap last time, but she wasn't awful, but she surely wasn't what the market suggested she was going to be.
She has a trip excuse, kind of hopping at the start, and I think took a little bump early in the race. But my gut on that one, coupled with the sort of way she looked during the week, is maybe that's an indication that she's just not in form. And granted, winter off maybe gets back into form. That barn known for taking a lot of time between races, but I think she's one who a lot of people are going to want to forgive based on the trip. And I think there might be more equity in taking a cynical view, which I guess is basically what you're saying as well.
She was surrounded by 30-1 shots. Obviously, one of them I'm interested in Vibrance, but I just, as what the world expected her to do based on her figures previously and the figure that she ran before, Timeform US, she went from a 114 to a 102, and she was supposed to be able to overcome some of that to a certain extent. Maybe get nailed at the wire for the win or whatever. But I wasn't very impressed.
Let's talk about the juvenile turf. Uncle Benny certainly had a noteworthy trip, trouble kind of throughout the race, really, and still only went down by half a length to Line of Duty. And I think also, if I'm remembering it right, both the first and second here spent time on the rail, meaningful time on the rail during the race. So I wonder if that could be a vibe. It wasn't as bad as folks such as ourselves were suggesting the other day. It could be a sign that they're both just considerably better even than it looks. One other dimension that I wouldn't be afraid to bet back at all, Anthony Van Dyke. I think he's going to be better on better ground. Obviously, the post did no favors, but I don't think he lost anything despite a very nondescript run as the favorite in the juvenile turf. What did you have in here?
The third might hurt the price moving forward, but I love Some Like It Hot Brown. I think he's a really talented horse. I think he's gonna stretch well for Maker. He's tactical. He's forward. He'll be able to put himself in a lot of positions. I'm excited to see him in these 1 1/8 races. I'd love to at a really crazy price, right? If we had a market with the liquid where I could bet this horse to win the Belmont Derby at 75, 100 to 1 or whatever it might be, I'd love to get involved, but I
think even if there were a future market for that race, which there isn't, I think his attributes are too obvious to be anything that crazy. If it was something more grounded in reality, like a 20 to 1, I mean, would that still interest you?
No, there's too many steps between now and then, but
fair.
You would think some Chad horses would take money. Line of Duty would take money, and there's a bunch of other horses in there I think they would take money. But anyway, I just think he's talented. I think I could definitely get involved with him. I would envision having a love affair with him throughout the rest of his 3-year-old campaign.
Let's talk about the juvenile a little bit. Game winner, obviously, super duper impressive. I can't believe, going back, looking at the chart, Nick's Go was 40 to 1 in this race and ran really, really well. This was a funny one where I remember seeing the big morning line predicted on Nick's Go and thinking, that seems aggressive. Well, if it was wrong, it was wrong in the other direction than what I was saying. The horse ends up going off at 40 to 1. Let me kill that telephone here. I don't know who's bothering me in the bunker during the middle of the show. Don't they know I have a podcast to record? Just curious for your thoughts on the juvenile JK and ones you might be wanting to take out of this. And then I'm going to ask about a specific horse if you don't bring them up.
There's two horses that are going to get that I'm interested in. One's the obvious, one's a little bit less obvious. They're going to get the can't wait for them to run one turn. Our buddy Chris Larmy made a funny joke about quoting exactly how I'm going to say it, that I'm going to misquote the H. Allen Jerkins and that. I think Complexity obviously is going to end up being a talented horse around one turn, and there'll be some cutback opportunities from. I wouldn't write him off in the stretch game. I mean, I just maybe it just wasn't his day for whatever reason, but I think he'll probably excel when the distances kind of come back to him a little bit. And then, this is a Nick Tamero thing that I picked up from Nick a long time ago, that he used to talk about Frosted all the time. And is when horses range up or are always in position, they train well, they're highly regarded, and they run poorly just because they need to be cut back. And I think Topper T might be the type of horse that when he's with Bill Mott a little bit, too many smart people like the way this horse trained for him to just not be very good. And I think that maybe the opportunity will be better. The opportunities will be better for him when they go a little bit shorter.
Interesting. And that was the horse I was going to ask you your opinion on, just because he was one of the real buzz horses of the entire week. So many horsemen pointing out how well he was training, etc. You got to figure more time in the Mott barn. And then from there, you would be inclined, based on his record of success, to trust wherever it is that Mott chooses to put him. So I'm happy you called him out as well. Let's move on to Saturday. Let's start with the filly and mare sprint. I'll just ask you a question about this one. Who had the worst trip in this race?
I guess based on, look, both horses I had didn't get great trips, right? I used Golden Mischief and Marley's Freedom. They both, Golden Mischief kind of got shuffled. Marley's Freedom didn't have a great trip either. I don't know. I mean, I guess one of those two horses didn't get great trips.
I think most people might throw Shallon out there with some obvious stuck in a vice, and I think 2 different points in the race as another one just to throw in as a possibility. There were a lot of trips in this race, which is why I asked the question.
No, I mean I think you're right. I mean, from a standpoint of she still got in the mix for second and probably could have or should have won. But I think the 2 highly regarded horses that I think didn't get a chance to really even show their stuff was Marley's Freedom and Golden Mischief, just kind of getting shuffled the way they did. And but like we said last time, kudos to IRAD for a brilliant ride back-to-back years in this race with back-to-back bombs.
Certainly one of the better rides on the weekend, I thought, was the Shamrock Rose one. All right, this might be blasphemy. Was it a bad trip on Marley's Freedom, JK, or was it a bad ride? Further back considerably than usual. I have to wonder tactically, if Mike Smith had it to do over again, if he wouldn't try something different. But I'm just, I'm not trying to knock the guy. I'm just a guy with a podcast looking for interesting stuff to talk about. Your thoughts?
Mike can be a lot of things maybe to a lot of people, but one thing he's not is he's not a guy who takes away a horse's weapon. He's just not a guy who, like, the horse breaks and is showing speed and he's like yanking on the face, pulling them back to last. This is like not what he does. He didn't really hustle her away from there, but maybe she just didn't put him where she needed to be. I have heard from a couple of people. I actually think Tom Amos said before the race ran that she might not have been grabbing the track like he would have expected her to do. So maybe she just, in the mornings and stuff. So maybe she just wasn't feeling it. She got on track a little bit late, but I don't. I mean, what was he supposed to do? Dead sin? I mean, maybe. Was it going to make a difference? Maybe. I think that he was going to just kind of let her, go where she went, and he felt like she was good enough, so why get in her way? That's one of Mike's biggest attributes, I think, is he stays out of their way. He did the same thing with Zenyatta, and he did it with the big horses, with Justify and with why am I going blank on Songbird? So I don't think it was a bad ride. Maybe in hindsight he would have done something different.
I think that's an excellent analysis. You didn't leave any meat on the bone there. Very, very, very well said. Let's go on to the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Not a race I have a ton to say about, other than to maybe call out a horse who had an inside trip in Chanteline as one to maybe put on that bet back list if the inside turf dead thing becomes a reality.
I think she was getting sold in the sale. I think I remember seeing her name.
Sold and racing days over.
It's still racing age. I guess they couldn't race her, but anyways, I just keep an eye on that for possibly changing hands. I thought World of Trouble was pretty good. He found himself. He cleared. And when you can clear this race, it's always something to write home about, and then kind of got himself down on the inside a little bit. So if the inside wasn't good coming off the turn, he was down in there, and then was just in a dead duel with a back-to-back Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint winner at 5 and at 5.5, and a horse that also has won some Greatest Stakes, won 6.5. So I thought those two stood out. Disco Partner ran well, but just don't think he wants it as soft as it probably was. But Ruby Notion is one that I thought ran well off the inside.
Yes, Ruby Notion definitely likes that cut in the ground. We've seen that before. Very reasonable underneath horse at big odds.
I'm gonna start calling World of Trouble Allen Iverson.
Doesn't like to practice, JK. Doesn't like to practice. We were making jokes too about after Stormy Liberal won, somebody pointed out the irony of the managing partner of Stormy Liberal being named Trump. That was one joke that was made. And then we were talking about how this reflected on limousine liberals' chances, and if we might not see a blue wave at Churchill Downs, which did not materialize. But anyway, it was Stormy Liberal is going to be interesting to see as a story in a division that needs stories. A lot of people who have opinions that I respect talk about, and Mike Watchmaker will say this, talk about the turf sprint division, turf sprinters in America as horses who've failed at other things, as opposed to being a division in themselves. Well, I definitely believe there's a little bit of a, if you build it, they will come aspect to the turf sprint division in America. And the more that we have big races, and the more that we have a program, and the more that we have stories happening that are interesting in that program, the more people might start pointing horses or picking out horses to run in this division. And I feel like if Stormy Liberal stays together and makes a run at a third Breeders' Cup next year, it's the kind of thing that could put a much needed spotlight when it comes to the turf sprinters in the USA. What's your general view on this division? And answer it two ways. Answer it from a sporting point of view, and talk about it from a betting point of view.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked it like that. From a sporting point of view, I agree. I think the juvenile turf sprint will help. And just kind of allowing there to be some stars made that kind of come up the ranks, and we get to fall in love with. And like you said, a lot of times it's like reverse engineered almost, where like they do something different, they end up being a turf sprinter. So that'll be fun to see Bulletin turn out to be, if he doesn't stretch out, turn out to be just a world-class turf sprinter that we get to see for a while. From a handicapping standpoint, I don't mind turf sprints. We've talked about that before. Our buddy Matt Bernier does not like them. Here's what I think. I think that people hate turf sprints because they give you illogical results, because you can stare at the paper and say, this thing has to fall apart. It has to. And then the speeds will run 1-2. And I think that's why they're so frustrating to horse players is the closers don't get there even when you think that they should. And then when you think that they shouldn't, then they snap you in the last jump.
Sounds about right. I've used the phrase before. Somebody pointed it out on Twitter and said they liked it, laboratory for chaos. And I do think that could be the case. And what I mean by that is the little subtle things end up taking on massive, propel results in a massive way when you're going that fast over that short of a time. And I think that also leads to some of the seemingly crazy results in the same way that the butterfly flapping its wings in China causes rainfall in Wyoming, if you follow. Anyway, let's talk Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I'll tell the story, JK. So Mike McCarthy, his nickname is Whitey. This is a nickname that I had been told at some point he was looking to shed himself of as he moved on in his professional career. I guess he used to be blonde. I have no idea where the nickname comes from, honestly. But he was using it of himself on the backstretch at Churchill Downs. In fact, we were at some point riding around in the car with him, going back and forth to watch works, probably watching City of Lights last work, and he was just sort of joking around, referring him to himself in the third person, and he said something to the effect of, look out, white man coming through. So though, like nicknames move around, Whitey becomes white man. I once owned a horse. Actually, that was the exact progression of his nickname. His barn name was Whitey, and then it was White Man. Anyway, White Man, that's McCarthy. And I remember 2 minutes before this race, JK, knowing that it was an important race for you in the contest. Were you all in?
No, but I was alive for like 15,000.
Gotcha. And I remember, texting you. We'll typically text something like, let's get one for the good guys. Let's win one for the good guys. Let's famously the gun runner route with Pipito in the screens at Del Mar last year. Let's win one for the boys back home. And so I text you with 2 minutes of the race, not thinking about what I'm writing. Let's win one for the white man. And then a minute after that, it occurred to me the words that I had written, how if they had just been read by some passerby, how it would come off. And I texted you back, JK, those are not words I ever imagined myself typing, least of all to you.
Absolutely. It was a ton of fun. You know what's funny is I actually think if you look at Mike's saddlecloth, I'm going to ask him. I'll ask him one day. If you look at his saddlecloth, it's like MWM, but the W is white, like it's like the color white. So maybe it has something to do with his middle name. Like maybe his middle name like kind of sounds like, it's
Whitmore or something.
Yeah, Whitmore. That'd be ironic, but no, it really would be because Whitmore beat him in the Forgo. But I'm sure he'd want to change it if it was Whitmore. But
we need to find this out now. It's out there. As far as this race goes, we've talked about how terrific City of Light was. Only horse to beat horse of the year finalist, we'll call him, Accelerate throughout the course of 2018, and just super impressive. We talked about how excellent this ride was. For me, some might say, oh, well, Castellano, he was really a passenger here. And I think Castellano even described himself that way. It's being too modest. I mean, it ain't easy to break down from the inside from that chute where you're always going to be off slow a half, it seems, for the angle of the gate or whatever reason it is. For him to have encouraged him to get going and get out of there and overcome that semi-tardy break and put him in the position he was without using too much energy. For me, it's one of the riding achievements of the whole weekend. What are your thoughts? And I have another one to highlight in here, but what are your thoughts in this race?
This race was the most fun for a lot of different reasons for me, just because we were able to spend so much time with Mike over the week. And then to see City of Light's final work, we were there for the beginning. We were there when the annoying state vets were like coming by and like right when he's about to work. And
we'll get to the annoying state vets in a minute.
And then Javier coming by and Panagot being there, and then us jumping in the car and the security guard trying to stop Mike from driving over there, and then us running up to the thing and watching Javier work the horse, and then Mike thinking he might have had a broken watch because the horse came home in 22 and change, and then us going back over and watching Mike and Javier have a conversation, and Javier's eyes light up saying, man, he did it so easily, and he did, and then to see the plan come together and watch the horse win by 2 in a big race like that. It was just a ton of fun to watch.
2 3/4 even, JK. One more I'll mention in here, just as a horse I would bet back. Somebody mocked me on Twitter for picking Seven Trumpets as a horse who I thought my actual wager in the race. I was rooting for you. I was rooting for McCarthy and Javier, but my bet was 7 Trumpets each way. And meaning UK wager, it's basically win show, but you get a nice fixed price on the show. And somebody mocked that pick. I just think he was too close. He just didn't get the trip at all I thought he was going to get. I expected him to be held up and make one run. And if the pace had melted down, I did think he had a tiny, tiny, tiny chance to win, but was more just interested in him running up for a piece of second and third. I wouldn't necessarily give up on this horse going forward. Am I nuts?
I think he needs shorter. And he's kind of in and out, off and on. So he just might be a really, that's what we talked about the other day, the difference between inconsistent, there's difference between like good, great, bad, good, all those things is consistency and talent. And he's just not a very consistent horse. And so maybe a little bit shorter. I mean, I kind of thinking about his 2 runs, the one at Parks and the one at Saratoga around one turn, but shorter, right? The 7-6 furlong variety. Maybe he just needs a little bit shorter.
I like that. And I think you're right. It needs to be a price, not one you single, one you try to make some things happen with. You're not necessarily singling a pick 4 around the horse, but a horse that I feel like could have a nice win, if only to rub it in the face of people who make fun of me on Twitter for picking the horse. Because then again, where is the equity in knocking people for picking 22-1 shots? I ask you, JK. But it's rhetorical, so we can move on. And the next race. Oh, actually, let's pause for 1 second on Catalina Cruiser. This is another one where somebody could point to the poor break, but then I just wonder if the poor break isn't an indicator of declining form, that I just don't know what we have here. I'm not saying the horse can't win, obviously, but seems like one who's going to probably be bet heavy, and maybe the view next time will be to fade if possible. This is also the kind of horse I've seen you just say, everybody's overthinking it, I'm just going to single them the next time they show up. I know this is a ridiculous question without knowing what the race is and who all else is showing up in it, but what's your general gut about Catalina Cruiser going forward? A little skeptical or a likely single?
She's traded by John Sadler. I'm just kidding. That's obviously doesn't matter. Ask my bankroll.
She's also a he.
Yeah. See, it's the A. I don't know why they do that. Don't end horses' names in A's. I'm from Texas. Like, if you end something with an A, it's feminine in Spanish. Here's the thing about Catalina Cruiser, and as a horse who I think it's probably fair to say that he's ouchy, right? Like, it's why he's missed so much time. He's way too talented to have only run as many times as he has if there wasn't some physical issues. Hanging around horsemen, there's this one point that I've heard that I used to always hear that phrase that a turf horse will run well on the dirt one time and then they won't do it again. And I actually heard someone explain that last week. It actually might have been Jake Ballas who explained it. But the reason being is that running on the dirt is more taxing on a horse physically. And typically after the race, they're going to be slightly more sore. Just body sore. If I go run a mile on the concrete versus running a mile on the grass, I'm going to be a little bit more sore. And so I think what happens is they realize when they lay it down on the dirt that they don't want that feeling again. And I think that what happened with like Catalina Cruiser is like constantly getting hurt. Like maybe at some point mentally he's just like, look, man, I'm just not doing this anymore. Like when I run hard and I run fast and I run 130 time form US figures, like I get hurt. And like, I just don't want to really do it anymore. And maybe
just to clarify, you're not suggesting that there's anything dangerous, or you're just saying I
just think that like we're all creatures of, it's just like you just probably realize it. Look, if I went out and ran a mile right now, I'm not very like mentally tough at this point in my life. And if I'm sore tomorrow, like I'm not doing it next week. I'm just not going to do it. It's not that I'm injured. It's just that like, I just don't want to do it anymore. Like I'm over it. And I just think that maybe that's what happens with these horses. Like they lay it down and they just realize, I just don't really want to do that anymore. Like, it's the same with fillies. They, we always joke they want to become moms. Like sometimes they're just tired of it. And he's had a rough career, obviously, with a lot of hiccups along the way.
It's interesting. So it sounds like you share my view there, really, to be a little bit skeptical going forward. I don't have a ton on the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf. Talked about Wild Illusion, my theorizing that maybe the antics before the race ended up costing her a little bit of a trip too. I mean, this is one who's obviously very interesting to see going forward. What do you know about, maybe this is a good opportunity to just talk about when Chad Brown has many runners in a race. Every wise guy in Saratoga will tell you, that how often the other one wins, the longer priced of the entries of Brown's horses win. I've never studied it. It seems like a very easy thing to observe. It certainly can be true. There are other races where it seems like when you have a whole bunch of horses in there, he would set it up in certain ways for the horse who was bet amongst his grouping of horses. See some of Lady Eli's runs the year before. One could argue a version of that was maybe going on in this race for Sister Charlie. So I'm just curious if you have any specifics, but if not, just to comment on how you approach a race when Chad Brown has multiple runners.
So I think it's the same. The other Baffert, the other Todd, the other Chad. I think that when they, and, you know, I'll let you say it. I'll just set you up for it. But Frank Scatoni's got a saying, and it is.
Frank's got a lot of sayings. Which one are we talking? Oh, why enter two when one would do?
Yes, why enter two when one would do?
That's out the window with the Brown barn, though, as we've seen.
But I think the reason is that the one, for whatever reason, you don't trust enough, isn't that far ahead of the other one. And so sometimes the public obviously leans on the one with the bigger name or the better resume, but the other one is right there. And I think it's an indication of that horse being right there because Chad or Baffert enters the horse in the race with them. And so I'm not like, I don't ever think it's funny business. I really never think it's funny business. I just think that like they're all out there trying to win for their owners. Because like I've told you before, I can't see how Chad's going to, sit down with Mr. Brandt and say, look, here's what we're going to do. All right. I'm going to hold your horse up and I'm going to win this race for Clariman. Right. And the next time it'll be your turn. Like, I just don't.
I don't think that happens.
The game's just too complicated, too expensive. There's too much on the line. So when people try to act like there's funny business, I just don't agree with it. I treat them like individuals, and I don't let the fact that there's multiple in there affect the way I view it. It's like there's Sister Charlie, there's 4-Star Crook, and they're all trained by one of the best turf trainers in the world. And that's as far as I go with it. I don't say, oh, it's Chad, so he's going to do this and that. I don't. I think it can, lead you down the wrong path.
I think that's fair. You could see people trying to play the game of, well, which owner's most important to the operation, but it's very hard with his operation because you've got, especially in a race like this where you've got so many key clients.
If they're that important, then he won't run anything else against them, right?
Though I don't think I think that point and the Frank quote are more right throughout the year. I think when it comes to a championship level race, you've got you kind of have to run them all, don't you?
Of course, if they fit and they qualify, and in my opinion, Sister Charlie should have been in the race. Obviously, a Raving Beauty deserved to be in the race.
Yep. Ran off Crook, just sounded maybe a little too far. 4-Star Crook certainly deserved
to be in the race. Santa Monica, a little bit of a reach, but deserved to be in the race.
Had run well enough.
And then maybe Tyus didn't deserve, but I'm not mad. I mean, she got in, so she clearly deserved it to a certain extent.
I was assuming Tyus was the rabbit who just didn't break, leaving Raving Beauty that de facto role and maybe making Raving Beauty's run even more impressive. Very interested to see where any of these go next, if we're going to get to see them next year. Have you heard anything about the fate of any of these in the Brown?
It'd be fun to see 4-Star Crook back. I did see Santa Monica's name in the sale, and there might have been another one of these in the sale. I just didn't see it. I'd love to see him back. From a value standpoint, I'm not really sure there's anything else Sister Charlie can do.
Right.
As a broodmare. So she might be done, but that's, I have no idea. I have not looked or just
she can make a lot of money too, is the other thing though. I mean, she can make a lot of money as a racehorse. But I do take your point about from the breeding side.
But isn't she worth a ton of money in full to like Mendelssohn or something, like a Scat Daddy Craw? I mean, look, I'm way out of my depth here, but
probably. I think the answer is probably on all counts. Let's talk about the sprint. We talked about Whitmore very briefly before. I looked at some pace figures and I wanted to recant my previous defense of Limousine Liberal. He had been that close to paces like that and finished before. So I do not see that as a reason. Roy H was just terrific. And I joked the other day, I mean, I just don't know how I do it every year. Some years I get it right, but too many times backing the East Coast sprinters against the West Coast sprinters. They're just, if there's one place where Tom Quigley's favorite hashtag is appropriate, it's when it comes to the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
Promises Fulfilled could be fun next year. Obviously growing up and Shackelford, I believe, stuck around for his 4-year-old year. That's when he won the cigar mile or the Met mile?
I'd have to look it up, honestly. I had that fact in my memory at some point, but it has long since been knocked out of there.
I'll have it. But anyways, I think he'd be fun to stick around, and he's obviously shown some brilliance. I just don't think, probably some growing up to do to be able to hang with the likes of those two freaks. So I think he'll be, hopefully he'll stick around, and I wouldn't see why he wouldn't.
I'll be interested to hear how he trains coming into his next starts, JK, just because it did not seem like he was earning as much clocker love late in the season as he was in the middle part of the season, if I'm remembering that right. So he may tip his hand if he's ready to come back to form. Definitely one I'll want to check out in the DRF clocker reports before his next start promises fulfilled.
Shackelford Met Mile.
Yes.
So he ran as a 4-year-old and ran well. Went out on a winning note, winning the Clark. So excellent. Let's move it on, JK. We've got 10 minutes left and plenty to talk about, including the results of our contest. We did not talk about the Polydream debacle. Now, I don't have all the facts. I just know what's been reported thus far. But the idea that the state vet would scratch a horse without seeing the horse at speed for connections like of Freddie Head, who's won the race 5 times, come all that way with a horse with, world-class form, and had an explanation for what the vet didn't like and wasn't apparently able to fully make his case. And then the day after the vet scratch came out, jogged around at Churchill, and apparently once again impressed everybody who clapped eyes on her. I just think it's one of we don't have, fortunately there's not too many black eyes on this year's Breeders' Cup. This has to go down as one of them. And I just wanted to complain about it a little bit on here. Look, I mean, I guess it has to be there. I guess they have to be there for the 1% that aren't going to do what's right by the animal. But it's unfortunate for the 99% that are doing right. It's frustrating.
It shouldn't be state vets. I'm just saying you got to use better judgment and
absolutely
use all the toolbox. I think they're doing what they're trying to do is obviously very, very admirable. And I understand why trainers obviously are going to be frustrated by somebody coming in and pulling and prodding and stretching their horse and all this. But I think there are situations where I'm sure they've saved equine lives. I have no doubt in my mind about that. I'm not trying to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. I'm just saying I thought this was a miscarriage of justice.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Should we move right on to the distaff, or did you have anything else in the mile? That's one where I really want to go back and look for those inside trips, which I haven't had an opportunity to do yet, if we're being honest.
No, my two things that, my boy Divisadero laid it down. I was very proud of him. We talked about that last week, and I'm excited to see analyze it again. Stick around.
Yes, I like your call for, I think, analyze it to be ridden like that against lesser, has a chance to really be a major player in the USA Miler division. Did you like the ride on Divisadero?
I mean, he was a little bit wide, but that's kind of, man, if you watch his races at Churchill, he always swoops wide. When he won American Turf, he always swoops wide. It's just what he does. He's not the type of horse that you need to bury down inside and get him stopped. That's just not, he's not that quicken type. He's that type that he has a 3 furlong burst that some horses don't have. And it's just a sustained type. And it is what it is. You're in a 14 horse field
in that post. Yeah. My gut was to be mad at the ride, thinking maybe it was an early move and obviously being wide and but I mean, I think I was just being bitter about needing him for third and him getting fourth by the thinnest of nostrils. The more I think about it from that post, you're exactly right. He's not a holdup. He's not a just go to the back and come flying in the lane. He has won like that before and could have. I think it wasn't an ideal ride because of the circumstances of the post, but I can't call it I just can't feel right calling it a bad ride, especially because wide, according to many, was where you want it to be, or at least not deleterious. So anyway, I'm with you on that one, but I wanted to get your unvarnished, unbiased take. Monomoy Girl, we talked about the other day. Looking back at this race, I was super impressed by how well Wildcat ran, better than I thought, watching that trip again, and watching her really fly home during the stretch. Interested in what you thought about Wildcat and Monomoy Girl going forward.
I heard some people say that Jose had a bad ride on Wildcat. She was far back, and she ended up getting stopped a little bit. I'm sure he'd like to have the ride back. I don't want to say it was just like he butchered the horse. When it comes to Monomoy Girl, I've heard talks of this, so I'm looking forward to that opportunity to take out reduction.
You cut out as you were saying that. I
said I'm looking forward to that opportunity of takeout reduction.
In the word that we didn't get was Pegasus.
Pegasus, yeah. I mean, God bless her. She's a good filly and one of the best I've seen on the racetrack, but she can't win that race. If we get some of the horses that show up and that ran in the Breeders' Cup Classic and so on, I just don't see her getting it done versus those, and she'll be bet, obviously. So we'll see what happens with her. Either way, it'll be fun to have her there, but I don't think that she could win that race.
I do like the idea of the Pegasus emerging as a true championship race where all these divisions come together, potentially a City of Light, potentially a Monomoy Girl, potentially an Accelerate. That's just a really cool concept going forward, and there's some year where that's going to make some unbelievable theater. For me, I mean, I get it, but I'm wondering if them pointing Monomoy Girl there means that's it for her because she could still be part of the breeding season next year. I would love to see what she could do, just pointed to the races where we think she does her best work, those one-turn miles, personally, if it's going to be a full campaign. If it's not going to be a full campaign, you might as well take a shot in the Pegasus, right?
For sure. And like I said about Sister Charlie, from a resume standpoint, what can you really do with her at this point that's going to, from a financial standpoint, increase her value? I mean, she did speed on the grass, so maybe getting her a Greatest Stakes win on the grass, but that's not going to change her value. That just seems cool. Like, she won a one-turn Grade 1. She won a Saratoga Grade 1. She won the Breeders' Cup Distaff against Older. She won the Kentucky Oaks. Like, she's worth what she's worth, I think, already.
Don't have a ton on the turf, except to point out, wasn't your boy Arklow, who runs fourth in this race at a giant number, didn't he spend some time inside too? Is he one we could look for if he stays in training to continue to cement you?
Look, I don't care if he's on the rail or not. When I see his names in the PPs, I see it. Save ground, off pace, absolutely. I mean, that race was weird. I think that everyone was kind of riding for second, and so he definitely got a piece, and he's definitely one that always shows up. So you could definitely consider him one. I would imagine he'll stick around. I don't think he's got a career at stud yet. He probably needs a couple more notable wins.
All right, let's go.
I wonder if anyone bet all their money on Talismanic this year.
You can check in the plays, JK. We can see.
I should look.
Character was in the BCBC. We're saving that for another day. We've got 3 minutes left. I want to gloat about winning the contest with you and Matt Bernier. Did you have something quick for the Classic before you just let me crow? And you folks who are just listening to this and haven't listened to the other show are like, why are they not talking about the Classic and the turf? We did a lot on them the last show. Feel free to go back and listen to all that. But did anything occur to you since we talked?
I ran third a lot against you in that thing, by the way.
Yes, there were a lot of thirds. And for third, you get nothing. Does that comment mean you're ready for me to crow and you're ready to eat some humble pie? I'm only disappointed that Matt was not able to edge you for third. I wanted to continue the tradition of you with the nuts emoji. Not nearly as fun with Matt Bernier having to wear the nut emoji as his Twitter avatar for a week, but I'm sure he will take his medicine like the professional he is. The nature of that game, you can't crow too much. A lot of it has to do with who gets to pick first. I didn't have anything clever, but it just so happened that I was fortunate in that a handful of the favorites I like got the job done. And as a result, New Vocations will be getting a donation from the DRF Players Podcast and the Matt Bernier Show. I can send you guys details of where to send the money, but I had the opportunity to talk with Anna Ford, who is the honcho over there at New Vocations at the charity dinner that I did the auction for during Breeders' Cup week, and I'm hearing lots of great things about that operation. And so that's where the dough is going to go. Any other excuses, or do you just want to acknowledge my greatness?
I'd like to acknowledge your greatness. I woke up this morning and I said, man, I got a lot to do. Got some errands to run. I'm going to get ready for my flight tomorrow, handicap for Del Mar. Oh, but I want to make sure I acknowledge Pete's greatness.
Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated.
And I also want to acknowledge that the Thunder Snow is a bettable horse. I've given him a hard time for his bias win in Dubai, but he ran well in the Jockey Club Gold Cup with that middle move, and he kind of showed that he's an actual racehorse here and kept it together and ran really well in that race. So we'll see what happens with him if he sticks around or whatnot. But I thought he ran well. What
got me in the Classic was the two narratives that I didn't believe. The narrative that, and it was basically, oh, the horse was short, that's why he ran that way, which for me often is just code for the horse heart isn't in it anymore. And I think on balance in aggregate, you do well to fade those horses. But in the case of Accelerate, and the way he looked in the lane of the previous race, I think you have to acknowledge that story was correct. He was clearly not 100%. He was 100% in the Classic. And Thunder Snow, it's the same sort of thing. I had said, well, if he's not going to win that Jockey Club Gold Cup with that trip over Discreet Lover, when's he going to win? And the answer is he easily could have won this race. And I think it just had to do with the fact that it was off the layoff. That first race, he was dead unfit. You can see from just the UK betting how unfit and how little was expected of him there. And then really, when you look at the Jockey Club Gold Cup in that light as a second off the layoff, building a means to an end. And then, I was also fooled by watching him gallop around there and him looking so headstrong. But throughout the week, good training job. They got him to settle. And he ran a blinder, unlucky, not to finish better. Really, to my eyes, just watching naked eye, looked like winning for a second. Remarkable training job there for Thunder Snow. We're out of time, and we didn't talk about the whip use thing on Thunder Snow. I should have had a note about that. We'll talk about that on a future show. Next show, we're going to talk heavily about the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. If you have questions, feel free to hit us up. He's at UT Big Hair on Twitter. I'm at Looms Boldly. Maybe we will shoe in the Sumayan whip question. Had you heard about this, JK, or is it only a big deal in the UK? I haven't really heard Americans talking about it, but it's a big talking point over there.
I saw it. I don't think it's any, the last time we heard this was probably Victor in the Derby again with Pharaoh, right? And then before that, it was Calvin with Rachel in the Woodward. So
we'll get into it next time. I just wanted to see if you even knew what I was talking about. I wasn't sure if it had cracked the consciousness of a lot of people here, but we'll get to that. We're over time. We got to get to Matt Bernier and the nut emoji coming up next on DRF Programming. I want to thank JK, thank producers AJ and Craig, Travis Stone and Willie Nile for providing the theme music and voiceover to our theme. For more of Willie's music, check out willienile.com. For more from Travis, just turn on the Churchill Downs feed somewhere. That's it. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. We'll be back on Tuesday. May you win all your photos.